Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Google Hangout. Guys, we are so excited about tonight's conversation. We are talking about the hate you give. But to continue from our last discussion that we had, we hope you enjoyed it. But tonight, we are taking it to the community. We are talking about different things, but we're going to look at it from what is going on with the community and how it deals with this particular book. We have a special guest tonight, but before that, I want to introduce my co-hosts. We got Nigeria Lockley, we got Margarita, we got Dina, we have Janelle, and we have Afi. Y'all, we are in the building, ready to holler at you. Yeah, we are at home, but we want you to know that we are taking it easy tonight because we want you to join us as we do what? Spill the tea. So we have a special guest tonight, and that is none other than Miss Joanne Montague. She is a retired Baltimore City police officer. So hello, Joanne. Everybody say hello to Joanne.
Hi, Joanne.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to meet you all, to talk with you all. Let me correct Deborah for just a little bit. I'm not retired Baltimore City. I am retired from the state of Maryland, the law enforcement side for the state of Maryland. Not necessarily the city, but it's all law enforcement collectively.
Okay, my bad. So tell us what was it like being a part of, let's say you were still on the force when a lot of the racial profiling really started to come to light. So tell us, what was it like to be on the force at that time, especially as an African American woman?
Very good question, and a question I think no one even ever asked a female officer. Being in law enforcement as a female and an African-American female, with the racial profiling and the logistics of it all, really put women in a different perspective, to a point that it really showed a male-dominated field. The only thing that really may have come across is the woman going to be maternal, or they did not respect the uniform as much. You literally, as a woman, had to, so to speak, pull up your guns. You had to get real boisterous with it. You had to be aggressive to make yourself know that I have just the best right to be an officer as a man. They respected you, but they disrespected you because they didn't feel as though as a woman you belong. And so you were easy prey.
So did that make it hard, especially when now we started seeing like the Freddie Gray incident, when we started seeing the Trayvon Martin, when we started seeing the Tamir Rice incidents? Did that make it hard for you guys, especially women, being on the force? Did they start, what happened when those kind of things? Because in the book it talks about just to give you a highlight, it talks about a young girl who witnesses her best friend, who's a black male, being shot by a white police officer. So how does that transcend into what you were doing on the force?
You wear a badge. It didn't differentiate whether we were black or whether we were white. We wore a badge. So if an officer shot a young black man on the street and they felt as though it was wrong, whether it was right or wrong, you wore a badge, so you were one of them. And no one ever takes the time to listen, to talk to. It's always talking at. So you getting your point across is not something that's going to happen. They are going to attack you just as they attack anyone else, until you can get that voice on the other side who wants to listen to reason. So we had to triple up in cars.
Wow.
With the Freddie Gray here in Baltimore. We had to triple up in cars. The midnight shift, which is one of the roughest shifts, it used to be the sweetest shift because you can just work and be at peace. But then it became so agitating and rough because that's the time they wanted to attack officers. So you could no longer just sit in a neighborhood that had a high crime rate to make sure nothing happened without anything happening to you. I had my car egged for no apparent reason at all. I had a young black African-American man, literally blade himself standing in front of my patrol car as if I did something to him. and I was just sitting there doing paperwork. So it was like the streets became unsafe for you to be by yourself, especially as a woman. That's how I felt.
Wow. So we're going to switch over to some of my co-hosts. I think Nigeria has a question.
Yes, I do. Hi, Joanne. Thank you for joining us on tonight. And I would like to know, because my father is a retired sergeant from the NYPD. And I know that very much, in his heart, it was very much blue over everything else. And so did you ever feel like you were divided in your allegiance as a Black person, a member of the Black community, and you're also a member of a community of its own? You know, being a police officer has its own culture, its own dynamics. That is something in and of itself that you have to be in to understand in a way. And so did you ever feel divided in your allegiance situations that were going on?
100%. 100%. It made you really think about your history as an African-American woman, as a civilian, because at the end of the day, I still had to go home and I still had to live. And so to go home and to live, but people know what you do as a career, became a double jeopardy. And to know that I took an oath to uphold the law, and not everyone took that oath and stood by it, but I'm also a community citizen. I'm also a pedestrian. I'm also a citizen. I also have to live. And so it became the point, I was a moving target. That's how I felt. Whether I was in uniform or out of uniform, I felt like a moving target, because it didn't matter. I chose a career that the world and the community began to see as a negative symbol.
Wow. I think Margarita had something.
Hey, Joanne, thank you so much for being here. My question tonight for you is piggybacking on what you just said. You just said that you're a pedestrian, you go home. Speaking of which, you have nieces. Do you have any nieces and nephews? I'm asking because at the end of the day, you have to go home. Does it make you, you speak with them day by day. Does it make you feel like, oh my God, I can't believe, it's a kind of pressure, I'm sure, do you speak with your family? Do you let them know, listen, this is what it is? And I'm pretty sure you do, but I'm pretty sure it lets you feel some sort of, because you have a family. I'm sure you have,
yes, the dynamics of the family life, in reference to my career and everything that took place, became such a strain, because I not only worried about myself, I worried about them a lot.
Right.
So my teenage cousins, males, I talk to them so much, because we feed into conversation. And so I had to tell them not to feed into officers. When they come out and they're really abrupt, just listen to what they say. Keep your hands on your wheel if you're being pulled over at a traffic stop. Keep your hands on your wheel. Turn your phone on. Call somebody. I don't care if you call the police. Call somebody. Have your phone on. Keep your hands visible at all times. Do not argue with them. Me personally, I even got pulled over in my own personal car. I left Baltimore City all the way up, probably about 2 miles, to a well-lit area while I called my godbrothers to come and meet me. And I'm a female, and I work in law enforcement. But it didn't matter. By the time they stopped, it was 4 police cars, and he had no reason to pull me over. None.
Wow.
But I was in a shiny car. It was a new car. It wasn't new tags, but it was shiny. It was new, and it was coming from the city up into the county. So they followed me all the way to the end, just because I was a female and I was in a car. So the same thing that I did is what I had to tell my cousins. I had to tell my nieces in North Carolina, and I had to tell them everywhere. Just listen to what they say and never move your hands. But whatever you do, please have someone on that phone. If you don't have anybody in the car, have someone on that phone so they can hear. I don't care if you FaceTime, I don't care if you're hanging out. Put somebody there so they can see it.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh no, go ahead, Janelle. I wasn't ready, so I'll hold on to what I say.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks for being with us. So I had a question that you said that the police officer pulled you over because you were driving in a nice, shiny new car from the city into the suburbs. And you said it's because you're a female in a new car. Do you think it's because you're a Black female in a new car that they followed you? Or is it just because female and you're in a new car? Because I feel like that makes a huge difference, especially as you're speaking to your family members as well.
To this day, I have no idea. In my own mindset and in my own finite thinking, I believe that they tried to intimidate me. That's what I believe from all the training that I've had in my career. I believe that it was an intimidation factor because when they pulled me over, when I finally stopped and my brothers were at the corner, they looked and I'm asking him, I gave him my license, I gave him my registration, and I asked him, why are you pulling me over? He still acknowledged and said nothing to me. And I know personally, when you run my tags, it tells you where I work. So that means he never ran my tags. And when he went to his car, once he got my license and registration, and he realized that I worked for the state in law enforcement, parole and probation, and I do investigations on them, that's when he decided to let me go.
Wow.
And when I got back to work the next day and I gave them the information in the intelligence department and advised them of it, and that's when it became such a big stink and you become that sore thumb that sticks out. But I'm not one that keeps my mouth shut. I'm never going to let anyone take advantage of me, whether I'm African American, whether I'm a woman. You will not have the last say or take advantage of me. I'm not going to be intimidated. One, because I took on this career because I understood what it is that I wanted to do. I had a heart to do, and I desired to do. So you're not going to run me out of it. I can do the job better than you, but you are going to respect me.
That's right.
Right. Thanks for answering that. It's just really interesting because even in the book, but also so many different instances of police brutality against Black people, even when it's women as well, whether they're pregnant or not, it's the common denominator is their race. So I'm curious to know if you feel like this situation would have been the same if you were not an African-American woman leaving the city in a nice car. Like why it just doesn't make so much sense to me. And that's what's really frustrating. But I'm not trying to put words in it, but I just feel like there's so much the racial bias that leads to so many of us getting pulled over and then so many of us being murdered for no reason.
Well, we can all day long we can say it's racial. Everyone can have in their minds that it's so much prejudice going on, which it is. It will probably never bring it to an end. But at the end of the day, it's white on white crime. It's black on black crime. It's white on black and it's black on white. It's all how you perceive it to be or what you're going to actually allow. But when it comes to the law enforcement side, they cannot drop the bar when it comes to training people. And when you train these officers, you have to make sure that you are continuously training them and that you're continuously checking up on them and that you hold them accountable. The Bill of Rights for law enforcement is something that has been changed over just this Freddie Gray thing happening, but it's a fight to get it to have been changed. I'm honest enough to tell you all that when it says that we stick together, we stick together. If you write it, everyone's writing the same thing. It's not until you stand the ground and go against the grain and do right is right and wrong is wrong. If your brother or your sister in that blue is wrong, you have to tell them they're wrong, and you have to write it that they're wrong. If it means that they're losing their job, they're getting a 15-day suspension, or they go back through training, so be it. But it's the life that's at hand. It could be your life, it could be your family life, it could be just themselves, because it's a very stressful job. So to take your stress out on someone else is an unfair thing to do.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Dina, did you have something?
Yeah, I want to riff on your comments about the perception of the problem. And I know a number of police officers. The ones I know are all men. I know Black and white police officers. one of my friends who's a white police officer says that, you know, he feels frustrated because he says a lot of times when he stops people, he can't even see, he doesn't even know who's in the car because he's using some device. I guess they're tracking people's speed. So it's you know, when it becomes a racial issue, he gets a little frustrated because he says that, you know, he doesn't even know who it is. And you know, I know that there was an article a little while ago on Facebook that was saying that in terms of the police brutality articles, you know, our news is being curated for us based on likes, and that white people were being shown very different things about this whole issue of, you know, Black people being shot by the police than Black people were. And that was sort of driving a very different perception of the magnitude of the problem. And I was just curious to know from an African-American woman who has access to both worlds, whether or not the perception of this as a problem in the police force is different than, say, what we perceive as civilians out on the street, and Black civilians specifically.
I would say yeah. I would say yes and no, but probably more yes than anything else. The perception coming from a law enforcement side, when you put that uniform on and you go out to do your duty for the day, no matter what it is, if it's a domestic, if it's a robbery, if it's a child that got hurt in school, if it's an elderly person, no matter what the case is, as soon as you show up, the community or the people are literally going to profile you because of the way that you look, basically your color. I worked with a different group of people, whether they were officers that were white, some that may have been Hispanic, and women. I worked with women too, and not just the men. And one of the things that I found out is that when things started trickling, or should I say changing, the people didn't want to go to certain areas. In the morning when you were assigned your duty, they didn't, I don't want to go to that area, because they already perceive that this is how the community is going to see me. And so I'm not a threat. I'm a liability. And my life is more in danger than it would be if I was just doing my regular jobs. When you talk to people and you can bring them down from that irate state of mind and allow them to give their piece and say what they want to say, and you give them the rationale of this what it has to be in order for us to have a calm, then they will have an understanding with you. But if you go in hot-headed and you just jump out your car and you just angry at the call that you got altogether, the perception is going to be way off the record still completely.
Most definitely. Okay, Afi.
Yes. Hi, Joanne. Thank you so much for sharing. I have a question based on a comment that you made. You mentioned that when you were pulled over, you recognized the officer's tactics as intimidation, and you recognize it because of the trainings that you received. Can you discuss a little bit more about the trainings and what exactly is the protocol for, again, pulling people over? Again, how are you trained to make decisions? And also the last comment that you made about, again, just not being angry and making sure that, you know, you comply. Just based on some of the footage that I've seen on the news where, again, back to the race issue, where we've seen a lot of angry white people fighting it out with the police officers and they're not shot. The guns are not even pulled because, again, it's, from my end, it seems as if they're following protocol and they're using all of their training to diffuse a hostile situation. So again, this is just really going back to what is the protocol. And in the trainings, is it understood that if you're in a certain community, the protocol adjusts, like, you know?
Well, let me see if I can address this systematically somewhat. In reference to a traffic pullover, with anything, a pullover or even a stop or approaching someone on the street, what is the justification first of all. An officer has to have the justification in order to do so. Never should it be just because they want to. It's not something that should be done randomly. The only thing that's done randomly if they're outside with the traffic meters clocking your time. That's done random, and if you're wrong, you're caught. But just pulling people over or stopping them on the corners randomly and checking their IDs, there has to be a reasoning behind it. There has to be a suspicion for you to do so. That is the proper protocol. If the car ran a stop sign, if it failed to stop completely, if the tail light is out, if you notice someone's not in a seatbelt, it's so many different variations to actually pull someone over, and it's really your job as an officer to advise them. When you walk up to the car, I'm pulling you over because of this. Mm-hmm. That's what you're saying. You identify yourself and you tell them what the reason is, and you ask them for their license and registration. And at all times, the person driving hands should be on the steering wheel, both hands in visible sight. At no time is it a threat unless you see a threat. An officer going up to a car with their weapon already pulled out, then there had to be a threat already perceived or seen. So if you jump in the car from robbing a bike or from beating up someone or stealing something, then yes, there is already a threat there. But a regular traffic stop, where is the threat for you to be weapon out? That's right there. You have to have that justification for having your weapon out, because it's weapon against weapon. You have to know what it is. Use of force plays a major play in all of this. Oh my gosh, it plays such a huge play, and you don't hear them using the words a lot. Use of force. Use of force is on different levels. You engage force on the force that is coming at you. And so if there is no deadly force coming at you, then there should be no deadly force that you're using.
Wow, that is amazing. You have shared so many things with us tonight. Dina has one more question.
So do you think the main issue is that there's a perception that the black people stopped are more of a threat, or it's a kind of disregard for us as people? Like, they're both racist, but they're slightly different. One is that the person feels that they must defend themselves because we're black, and the other is that they don't feel like they have to respect our lives and value our lives because we're black.
I would say that it's both. I believe it's if you have that hate in you, it's in you. You can only mask something for so long, and then there's a trigger. That's just like people with anger management. There's always going to be a trigger that pulls out of you that what you really are. That's knowing your true self. You can only mask it for a temporary. It's only temporary. So if you are a person that is prejudiced and racial, you're only going to be able to mask that until someone pulls your trigger, push your button. In reference to the fear, a lot of them that may fear the fact that, am I going to go home today? And I can be honest enough to tell you, I was fearful every day. I'm still fearful being retired, because there's still people on the street that I know I locked up. There are still people that I know I went in their houses, and their family members may recognize me, that I sent their child, their husband, their wife, or whatever to jail within reason and justifiable. I can honestly say that I'm very grateful that I was a good cop and I did not do anything underhanded. I gave everyone their leeway, but I was fearful every day because I wanted to come home the same way that I left, and that's not always a promise to you. And so you will always have that fear in the back of your head. And so pulling up or pulling over someone someone and not knowing if it's a child that may be disturbed or an adult who's just having a bad day, and they may have a weapon, or they may want to try you, and so to speak, in so many words. You have to always, there's really somewhat no training that a person can teach you to fight and defend yourself. They can only give you the tools to do so, but you have to think on your feet. Am I going to be afraid today, or am I going to be strong enough to be able to defend myself, that me and the assailant can both live?
I think the biggest issue and where we are, and to wrap this up for tonight, the biggest thing that we have to do as everybody, as all Americans, as all people, is that we have to learn to communicate. Because the biggest difference that we really have, because when you really sit down and talk to people, we're all the same. But because we try to make differences and we want to live in stereotypes, today is the day. Not only do we need to recognize that we are beautiful, we are strong, we are energetic, but we have to remember that we have to communicate and share our differences and be okay with our differences. Well, ladies, it's been a wonderful night. It's been an awesome time. Joanne, I'm just overwhelmed and glad that you were able to join us, even though we had some issues, but we got you in. Would you like to go ahead and give some closing thoughts before we wrap up?
First and foremost, I'd like to thank each one of you all for your questions, but more importantly, for allowing me to have that feminine voice from the other side that some people would consider to be the omen. We're human, no matter what career we choose to take on. I just wish that in the long run that there would be, just as Deborah said, a level of communication that we all can do and have. I hope that one day we can bring back the officer friendly. I came up in the officer friendly stage where the officers came to our schools, and there was policing in the community where you were able to meet them, and you don't have parents telling them to run from the police. So I just pray that we can get back to those days. I'm a third generation kid, where we can have that peace and in that understanding where we can feel some type of security going out of our doors in the grocery store or something to that nature. I am so very excited about what you all are doing with your tea. It's a great aspect and an enlightening format that you all have. And I wish you all the best in all of your endeavors and what you choose to do. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Joanne Montague, for joining us here on The Tea. Now, guys, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. And most of all, join us next week as the ladies and I debate out our book choice for October. All right, guys, again, thank you for joining our Google Hangout. Have a great evening.